Thank you so much for joining us on our third Design Insider webinar. As many of you already know, Design Insider is an online magazine which brings the latest news and trends from the contract furnishing sector. I'm absolutely thrilled today to be able to welcome Dr. Craig Knight to our webinar. Welcome, Craig. Craig is the founder and director of Identity Realization, a commercial organisation with strong connections to the blue chip industry. Working with his clients, Craig combines commercial focus with scientific application, and that results in increased employee well-being of up to 40%, productivity of up to 32%, and effective intelligence of up to 19%. So welcome, Craig, today. Hello, Craig. So perhaps you could start our conversation today by telling everybody a little bit more about your business.
Yes, of course. My business is Identity Realization. And for the purpose of what we're doing today, what it does is it looks at organizations and makes them better in terms of key variables like well-being, engagement, productivity, and latterly we'll be able to increase creativity and, quite excitingly, effective intelligence at work. We can now make people cleverer in space B than they were in space A.
Fantastic. And so why did you begin to explore the effects of the workplace?
Well, years ago, I worked for a company called Steelcase, who some of you may have heard of, and I didn't really care how the desks were put together, but I got fascinated by how where you sat affected how you felt, whether you sat in a curvy bit that went in or a bit that went out or a straight bit. And so I got interested in how design affects you psychologically. That then led me to look at managers, because we all know different managers make us feel good, bad, or indifferent, and then on to management techniques and how different styles of management, ranging from the very autocratic to the dictatorial to the benevolent, affect how we feel, but also affect our performance as well.
And so what's your opinion of the current design-led workplace solutions?
It's a very mixed bag, isn't it, really, Alice? I mean, it's what's designed at the end of it. What we found, be it designers or managers, they are not the experts in the people's place. So the people that are the best are the people that understand the place in which they work. And too often, when we have this design-led solution, the design that is led is appalling. Because if you think of it as just an animal for a moment, and let's think you go to a zoo, and you will go into the orangutan enclosure, and you'll see the orangutan swinging on ropes and having a little water feature and a tire and things they can play with. When you put that kind of stuff, when designers put that kind of stuff into an office, they win design awards. It's kind of the least we should be doing. And we don't. We tend to put people in these hideous, Spartan, minimal melamine deserts, which, if you think about putting any other animals in that kind of space, is nothing but bad for us. But that kind of design-led solution is abysmal.
And how is the current workplace coping with the massive rate of change enforced by COVID-19?
The COVID-19, well, we don't know how it's going to cope with COVID-19 yet. Maybe we should talk about that afterwards or subsequent to this one. But how is it coping with the massive rate of change until COVID-19? Not well, really. If you look at the standard practices that we have agile working, flexible working, hot desk, all this kind of stuff. They're all developed by Josiah Wedgwood back in the 18th century. And I mentioned when I started working at Steelcase, that was back in the early 90s, and I just came out of IT. And the early 90s in IT are really like, it's the dark ages, it's sort of Noah's Ark stuff. The office industry, the one I like and love and work with, is still recirculating the same ideas. So it's hardly changed at all. And if you don't believe me, look, if you just Google Sears 1906 offices, and you will see a modern office staring you in the face, including the flat screens that they use.
Wow, okay. And how valuable is agile space?
Well, again, it goes back to what I was saying before about expertise. Don't impose an agile space. Again, you're just imposing an 18th century solution when you do that. If you try to cram more people into less space, you will not get a good solution. I don't understand psychologically or financially why people do it. Roughly speaking, the cost of people to buildings is 7 to 1. Yet we cram people into space rather than make space for people. It is stupid. An agile space, unless it is what the people want, is never a good solution.
So what does and does not work then when designing those offices?
What makes a good office, you mean? Right, okay. If you want a really, really rough rule of thumb, if you go into an office and you see a clean, minimalist, tidy space, a rough rule of thumb, that's a bad office. If you go into an office and it's a bit of a mess, that's probably a good office. Because the best office is one where the people decide how they want to work, where they want to work, what tools they want to work with, what hours they want to work, all of those things. The more freedom, the more empowerment people have in their workspace, the better that office. And the less of that they have, the worse it is. It's that simple.
And so how do you facilitate empowering the employees in that way?
That's a really, really good question. And it's relatively straightforward, because when we do this work, what we do is nothing other than logic. Because again, if you go back to that animal thing, it doesn't make sense to put any kind of beastie in a space where it is just in a completely lean, Spartan environment. It just doesn't. It's always better, if you're a rat, rather than putting in a lean cage, to put it in a cage where it's got things to run around and be happy. But the happiest rat of all is the one where the rat can run around under the floorboards and chew wires and is at its rattiest. And the more we can facilitate that kind of thing, the better it is for everybody. So there's the logic. It's really easy. The hard stuff is the psychological thing, because there are maybe people watching this that have been on Six Sigma courses and think the lean office is a good thing. And we haven't got time to go into too much detail here, but we can categorically say the weight of evidence, every bit of science ever produced, if you like, that's looked at this will say, no, it isn't. It's awful stuff, right? So the emotion to get away from the things we've been doing in management for the thick end of 250 years is really difficult. So logic is easy, emotion is hard. And it's those two things coming together, and the logic needs to come through. You need to be more Spock-like rather than Bones-like about the workplace, if there's a Star Trek analogy.
And so within that, how important are things like the furniture and the ergonomics in contributing to the success of those spaces?
Let's just do ergonomics for a moment, because ergonomics is a fantastic science. I'm squiggling about in this. I've got a really nice, comfortable chair. The ergonomics is really important, but it is too often traduced by people that run offices. Too often people will say, right, you are sitting, whatever it is, 17 inches from a computer screen. You have a chair that goes round and round and up and down a bit. You have enough desk space. There you go. We can now do what we want. But it's far too often a stamp of abuse when it really, really shouldn't be. And furniture, of course, fits into that as well. The chair has to be right. The desk has to be right within minimum standards. And once those things are done, then people can do what they like. It should be a case that people should work where they are psychologically comfortable as well as physically comfortable. And by that, pre-COVID-19, you, for example, may feel entirely at home and comfortable working in your local coffee shop. The ergonomics may be dreadful, but you feel entirely comfortable there. So if you can make that space ergonomically good as well as spiritually good, if you like, it's good for the soul as well for the body, then you've got a really good space.
How can we create these sort of positive spaces now so many of us find ourselves working from home when perhaps we didn't before?
Good question. Right. Well, if you just let me just try and reframe the question, if you don't mind. Are you asking me how people can make themselves feel good when they're working at home? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, again, it's actually easy at home, and that's the really good thing, because when you work to suit yourself. So you don't have to work 9 to 5. You can if that's what you like. But if you want to get up at 7 o'clock and do 4 hours and then do nothing for the rest of the day until 6 in the evening and do another 4 hours, do it. Work where you like. Work in the kitchen, work in the loft, work in the garage, work wherever suits you. Make yourself comfortable and do the thing that suits the job better. You will know, it's your job, better than anybody, what you need to do to get it done. So do those things in the most effective way for you, in the places that make you feel best. That's it.
And do you have any tips for how people could make the actual physical spaces work well for them when working from home?
That's a good point. There are a number of things you could do. I mean, first of all, work where you feel comfortable, but there's a real book actually by a guy called Edward T. Hall, written in 1968, which is about proxemics. And if you look at where you're sitting, people feel, for example, psychologically better if they've got their back to a wall rather than a door. That's one thing. If you put yourself into what's called a harbour, so you have things around you, that is also quite a nice thing to move into. So you move into a space in a welcoming way. And also, if you want to talk to people, when you talk to people on the phone or when you're in Zoom, look at them as other person and point to them as well. You know, getting the eye contact right. I'm actually probably doing it wrong. I'm looking at your eye on the screen. What I should be doing is looking like that and looking at the camera when I'm not. I'll try and do that in future. So just try and get the body feeling right. If you're comfortable doing your job, you will do your job better at times that suit you.
Why does empowerment have such a powerful effect on employees?
Right. I've just actually done a quick burst about this. I do something called Psychology in the Shed on LinkedIn. And I had a mini rant this week about a 100-second rant telling managers off. Because when you work at a job, there are three things that you really need. It's the acronym ART, and that is autonomy, resource, and trust. And as soon as you empower people, straight away, you're giving them autonomy and trust. You're giving them two of those things straight away. That's why empowerment is such an important thing. And if you give them the tools to do the job too, then away you go. You've got something really good. And of course, there's the corollary of that as well. And that is, if you take those things away, and we spoke briefly about things like Six Sigma and Lean and all these things, which are about standardization, the elimination of waste, the elimination of error. When you take those things away, then you have the entirely opposite effect, which is why those management programs are so dreadful. Because when you take those things away, you are infantilizing your workforce. You are treating them like kids. And when you do that, you damage the organization and its productivity.
We've talked a little bit about the effects that COVID-19 is having on people working from home. Yes. I mean, what, in your opinion, do you think the effects of COVID-19 might have on the workplace when we are all able to return?
Right. Well, hopefully it'll do some good. The benefit, one of the few benefits that could come out of COVID-19 is people start to realize this psychological thing. We've spoken about the logic and the psychological, that actually they don't need to watch people all the time. It really doesn't matter if people go on Facebook at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It doesn't matter if they take a snooze at 2 o'clock. It doesn't matter to have sex at 3:30. It really doesn't matter what people do during the day, so long as they get their work done. You know, everything that we do, all the research that we've done since 2003 that points to empowerment being the really important tool, has never said, let's be soft on employees. We never said reduce targets. We've just said, let them do the job in the way that they want to do it. And the people that are working from home at the moment have the opportunity to do just that. If they don't do it, then there's opportunity for managers to get rid of them, the same way as there always have been. And that is the message that we should take back to the workplace. Whether we will or not is a different matter, of course.
So that really could mean quite a big change in the structure of businesses moving forward.
It should, Alice. It should make a really big difference. But the cynic in me suggests that it won't. What I suspect will happen, and I really hope I'm wrong, is that people will come back from COVID-19 and people will make lots of freedom speeches about how important it is, how we've learnt to do things. And then what will happen is what has happened ever since Josiah Wedgwood. People will take good words like empowerment, they will put them under management skirts, and they will bring into the aegis of management all of the things that really should belong to the workers. And they will, as always, put management on a continuum between being autocratic and benevolent, and they will either be good, more or less nice, and call it a result of COVID-19. And really what COVID-19 should teach us is managers back off, manage less, you'll find your job easier and the results will be better. That's really what we should be taking, but I bet we don't.
So how could employees approach their managers to help this change to take place?
Probably the best thing is a large cupboard and some ropes, and tie them up, stick them in, and let them get on with the job. That would be a really, really good thing to do. Short of that, it's quite difficult if you're an employee, isn't it? To sort of take over and say to your management, they're going to have a mutiny now, you go away. It's a very hard thing to do. That's why trade unions are such a good idea. Because if you can go to a trade union and say, look, this is what we need to do, then you have some kind of negotiating clout. As an individual, it's quite hard to do that. So the only thing I would suggest, if you have got rotten managers, is go above them and talk to people at the board. Because the one thing that works is money, and money will talk to any organization. And there is not just overwhelming, complete scientific evidence on the side of empowering workers, of giving them that autonomy, trust, and resource. And there is no scientific evidence at all on the side of not doing that. Things like, I don't know, the 5 pillars of lean or 6 Sigma and so forth, only exist in the business bubble. Business schools, business practice, businesses. They don't exist anywhere else. They certainly don't exist in science. So if you have a manager who is wedded to a particular philosophy that doesn't work, go above them, call me. I'll come in, I'll do a bit of ghost busting for you, I'll happily do it. And it's a really easy thing to demonstrate. All you do is just set up 2 areas in a company. That's what you're doing at the moment. That's what you should be doing. Measure the differences. Easy.
And is that one of your techniques for how you demonstrate the success and research?
It can be, yeah. I mean, there are a number of things we can do, depending. We can just show people the evidence. We can do something like a lunch and learn, right? A few butties and a slide and a discussion. We just produce the evidence. There you go. And it is very, very compelling. But if you have people that really want some evidence, we can do it very simply in just say splitting an area up and saying, there's one part, there's the other part. You do it your way. Let's try it this way. And using what's called the modesty of science, we say that's one idea, there's another, which works best. That's it. And then you take the idea which works best. It's not difficult. And there's a criticism of psychology, and a very good one, that when you look at psychological studies, because people are such weird, unpredictable animals, only 30% of psychological studies are robust. In other words, the things that reproduce time and time again. This is one of them. It's been robust since 2003.
Okay. We've actually had a really interesting question sent in by Richard Monroe, who at the beginning of his question, he actually talks about something that I think is very interesting, which is an employee's wish to move away from an open plan workspace into more individual, or back into more individual office spaces to allow for concentration.
Yes.
Is that something that you found in your research that helps people?
Yes and no. An open plan, people diss an open plan space because it's a very easy thing to attack and to criticize. And it's not necessarily fair. An open plan space can be egalitarian, it can be collegiate, it can be a really good way to socialize with other people, it can save money, it can do all kinds of good things. But it's also a very easy space to make people's lives miserable in, because it's one of these where you can have management by walking about and insist on clean work surfaces and all the rest. So there's nothing intrinsically wrong with lean. But what Richard is absolutely right on in making that point is that people need to work in different ways to achieve different functions. And that goes back to this autonomy thing. You ask them how they do it, how would they like to do it, and facilitate how they should. But you let them be driven, let the workers drive what they want in their space. So, yes, but you don't need to have an architectural change. You need a social change in the organisation to facilitate it. Absolutely.
Richard goes on to talk about how the open plan spaces are often used now for collaboration and meeting areas.
Yeah.
Do you think that there will be an inevitable move away from that because of the experiences we're all having right now with coronavirus?
The answer above, really. No, I don't. I'd really like to think, as we said before, that the COVID will make a big change. I really, really would, and it should, Richard. It really should. Do something about it, my friend. Make sure that people can go back, and if they want to work in different spaces, they can. And if you have an open space and that's all you've got, you can still make it a space where you can study, where you can think, where you can concentrate by just moving stuff around. Screens, plants, relatively cheap things can help achieve good effect.
Okay, fantastic. We did get sent in one other question before our webinar today, and that was from a gentleman who was saying that he'd been released from his employment in the thick of COVID-19 and into social isolation. And what real tips do you have for people to cope and sort of maintain their sanity whilst they're at home at the moment?
Well, if you've lost your job, it's a really, really tough time at the moment. It's what we have as a base of what we are. We're incredibly social animals, and to be plunged into isolation, especially after losing your job now, is undoubtedly difficult. What we are fortunate in now is that we have really good social links electronically. The fact that we're doing this Zoom today, we couldn't have done that many years ago. So stay in contact with as many people as you can, and talk to people that you haven't spoken to for a while. If you have friends in Australia, talk to them. Talk to all the people that you can. Keep the social network going, because the more people you talk to, the better, and the more people you can help, the better. The more you can take your mind off your own troubles and help other people, the better that is as well. So increase your social contact as much as you possibly can. So if you're in isolation, do it electronically.
Fantastic. So before we finish our conversation today, I would really like our listeners to be able to take away some really tangible, practical tips that they can do almost when our conversation finishes to help them improve the way they're working in their space at home. So would you perhaps have 3 or 4 really straightforward tips that people can implement?
Okay, let's recap a little bit. So yes, 1, work the hours that suit you. 2, find the space that suits you. 3, make the space right for you. Those 3 things. And then when you go back to work, if you are a manager, change the way in which people are managed at work. That's really important. And if you are one of the managed, squeak like the squeakiest wheel that needs oiling possible, that this is what needs doing. And ask for help if you can't get it. And if you need help from me, I will help with pleasure.
We've had one further questioning, Craig, if you don't mind.
I'm not sure.
Where the gentleman asks, he says he runs a small sales office, where if they currently follow the 2-meter distance rule, that the 3 members of their team are not actually able to work at the same time. This means that working from home for them is something that will probably need to continue post COVID-19.
Yes.
And do you have an opinion on that?
On what? On what effect that's likely to have?
Yeah.
My background is sales as well. Salespeople like to talk and chat. Do what we're doing now. Keep in contact. The best contact is face-to-face in the same room. I think we're all starting to realise that as we go through COVID-19. It's much nicer to press the flesh, to share a coffee, have a piece of cake or whatever. That's nice. But doing this is far better than not doing anything at all. And doing this is probably better than telephone conversations too, because you have the option of turning things on and off. So salespeople like to talk, salespeople like to swap ideas, let them talk, let them swap ideas, have meetings. And if you are the manager, what I recommend doing quite often is letting the salespeople set up the meetings, because that way they're valuable meetings to salespeople and they'll invest more. That's a great tip, Craig. Thank you so much. No. Well, I would like to thank everybody that joined us for the webinar today. And enormous thanks, Craig, for sharing that expertise with everybody. Oh, thank you. Once we've finished today, I do have a slide to share with everybody that will give everybody the opportunity to find information on how to connect with Craig and how to follow his business online. Our next webinar is going to take place next Wednesday on the 22nd of April at 4 p.m. If you follow BCFA/Design Insider over on LinkedIn, that's where we will share all of the details of who I will have the opportunity to speak with next week. So I'd like to thank everybody. Thank you, Craig. Pleasure. And thank you everybody for joining me, and hopefully I will see everybody next week. Take care. Bye. Bye.